Season 3 is about to be announced, and I have a few very realistic things that I want to see Blizzard do. Number 1, I think Shadowmeld has overstayed its welcome. It's perpetually been one of the strongest racials in the game in all content other than Raid, because of the sheer unique utility of dropping combat and targeting. It is immensely useful to be able to meld off a Fireball cast, or to meld a Shadow Blast, or Homing Missile, which for some reason don't recast, or as a healer to meld and drink, or meld and res. But those are all just the tip of the iceberg. This M+ season came with a lot of skips involving the VDH tank pulling a pack of mobs to the side, having the team run past, leaping away, and melding. Things like the 2 mechs in Motherlode, the diffuser in Rookery, drill in Workshop, even bubbles in Floodgate, which is a very annoying skip because it fails half the time. Most of these skips can be done with other tanks. Warrior can do everything the same except for Misery, for example, but once you get to the less mobile tanks like DK or even Pally, who doesn't even have meld, it becomes really unfortunately meta-defining that you can't bring a tank because they can't play a specific race, and you have to play certain packs that you wouldn't otherwise play because of it. But it gets even worse than that. This is the first M+ season since cross-faction that did not have an Evoker or Paladin in the meta. This means all 5 group members of the top groups are Night Elf. So now we are seeing 5 meld skips take place. In Motherlode, you don't have to walk around the side of the mechs at the start. The whole group just runs straight down mid and 5 melds them off. In Rookery, they walk right through the 2 diffuser packs and 5 meld. These skips are pretty concerning because it turns your racial choice from a personal utility button to something where you literally need to change the entire route because one single person is playing a different race. And also, it's very bad for the 3 classes that cannot be a Night Elf. And also, it diminishes the unique utility of Hunter and Rogue, which are already kind of struggling in terms of their utility. And this is not just a Mythic Plus problem. The PvP ladder is also dominated with Night Elves. Now in 11.0.7 they did come out with a racial rework that did pretty much nothing. Void Elf became a bit too strong in Raid, Mag'har became a bit too strong for damage for certain classes. The rest of these, people probably just forgot about them because there is such a major difference in utility between Night Elf, Dwarf, and everything else. I do hope they have an actual rework plan for Shadowmeld, and I hope they don't wait till next expansion. And I hope that rework isn't just an increased cooldown or something, because that would just make it more annoying to use. It would still be as strong as it is. And of course, if they hit Meld, they probably should also hit Dwarf and maybe reduce the numerical value of Mag'har a little bit as well. Number 2, I want to see better trinkets. In the current season, trinket balance is absolutely abysmal. We have 55 trinkets in the game, and only 17 of those are really usable. But it's not even about numerical balance, these trinkets just feel bad. The early bosses of the raid drop a bunch of unused damage proc trinkets that are not used by many classes at all. We have the Gear Grinder's keys that send a bike in, but it's a skill shot, and even when you hit it, you barely see a health bar move. You have the Junk Maestro's Mega Magnet that stacks up to 30. You would think it's a big hit at 30, it's not really. You have the Mr. Lock and Stalk, which you can switch between a single target proc that does no damage, or an AoE proc that does no damage and is split. You have trinkets like Torque's Big Red Button, which is not used by anyone. Pretty much a useless item even when the season first came out. You even have something like Reverb Radio that is arbitrarily just poorly budgeted such that even Fire Mage, the most haste hungry class, does not use it. In previous expansions, these trinkets would have at least been used by tanks, but now because there's an arbitrary tank tax, even tanks are just using stat trinkets. And it's really bad because we know this is by design. It's been said in an interview that they intentionally design early raid trinkets to not be as good.
We don't consider the other ones a failure, right? Something that we talk about on our team a lot is the gearing journey, right? Like, you aren't going to get full bis immediately. We hope that on your way to it, that you're getting things that are fun, that are cool, that feel good for the time that you get them, or maybe you keep something around because it's good in M+, or this and that, right? Like,
sadly, because of the way that the upgrade system and Mythic Plus drops work, it is very easy to get a champion track version of a good trinket, which outscales hero or even myth track versions of bad trinkets. And most of the bad trinkets aren't exactly fun. Of course, this extends to dungeons as well. We have some good trinkets from dungeons like Sephorium, Signet, even Candle is okay. Then we have some really bad trinkets like Sigil of Elgari Concordance, which would do about 0.5% of my damage. Or Charged Stormrook Plume, which for some reason does as much damage as Beacon or Bolorelos did in Dragonflight. Even in Delves, we have this disparity. We have some of the best trinkets you would possibly get from Delves in the Sus Energy Drink, or the Funhouse Lens, or the Mechanocore Amplifier. But then, apart from that, we just have useless trinkets, like the Blastmaster 3000, or the Amorphous Relic, which is a trinket with less passive main stat than on use if you were to not use it. It's kind of sad to get one of those trinkets as your only hero track delve item in a week. It just makes no sense to me that they are so randomly selective with what trinkets are good and bad, and it's reflected in the community by looking at the dungeon vote for Season 3, where they chose the dungeons that house Sackbrood, Seaphorium, Signet, and Empowering Crystal. And an unrelated note on that, I hope they add some necks in next season dungeons. I'm not really enjoying having 2 necks in the entire dungeon pool, and we just voted for 4 dungeons without necks. Number 3. I am really hoping for the final raid of this expansion to have at least 10 bosses. Now, they have been doing shorter raids for a while. In Dragonflight, they went 8 into 9 into 9. This expansion, they've done 8 into 8. I think a lot of the issues they've been having with encounter balance and difficulty curves and even loot distribution are results of this philosophy of making smaller raids. Now, it seems like Blizzard aims to make around 4 difficult Race the World First bosses, and I think it's fine to do that. Race the World First is a spectacle. They definitely should have some level of challenge for the Race the World First because of the publicity that it gets. And then they also have around 2 really easy mythic bosses that a casual guild can come in and kill in a night early in the tier. So this only leaves them 2 bosses in between in an 8 boss raid, and they have to get those 2 bosses perfect, otherwise the difficulty curve is destroyed. As you saw in Narubar Palace, they made the first 4 bosses too easy, and the difficulty curve was a complete cliff. In Undermine, Rick was alright, but Styx was far too hard, and that caused them to have to unleash the nerfs on Styx. And then because there was a bottleneck of guilds that could then easily kill Styx after the nerfs, they had to unleash the nerfs on Sprocket. And then they had to unleash the nerfs on One Armed Bandit, except they didn't nerf One Armed Bandit, which caused it to be deemed the hardest 6th boss of all time. Which wasn't true in reality, it was actually not that hard of a boss, but statistically, it was true. It wasn't because of the difficulty of the encounter, it's because of how the nerfs flowed. Here are some graphs of the War Within's 8 boss raid first pool counts for the World First Guild. And here is a comparison of that to Shadowlands' 10 or 11 boss raids, which still had hard bosses, but there was a bit more actual prog time leading up to them for guilds to get some gear and inertial nerfs to come in, so that lower tier guilds were not facing the World First versions of the bosses. The curves for the War Within ramp up far more aggressively, and it is not simply the result of one hard boss in the middle, like it was in Shadowlands. Now, I think this would also be good for itemization in the raid. In Undermine, a leather user cannot get a Myth Track helmet without killing One Armed Bandit or Gallywix mythic. There are 2 necks in the entire raid. There are 3 rings in the entire raid, and only one of them is a normal ring. There are 2 cloaks in the entire raid, and one of them is very rare. I think there is just a lot of uncustomizability in terms of raid items right now because there are such few bosses to even put the items on. I think perceived balance is also impacted by the lesser amount of bosses. People will remember Liberation of Undermine as the Windwalker, Shadow Priest, Mage tier. But realistically, those classes all had their strengths and weaknesses, and DPS balance was actually pretty close in terms of single target damage. It's just a few encounters we had really favored some specific classes. Also, it is kind of just lame, isn't it? Like, you get a cool Undermine Goblin raid using the whole new zone, except it is only 8 bosses. Like, there is space in this raid for 2 or 3 more bosses. We could have had a cool, like, Goblin train boss, a drill train boss on the left, or maybe like a pirate ship boss in the water area on the top right, a golf boss in the golf course bottom right, and maybe they even could have had a boss in the Galagio or something. It just feels like it's a cool thematic raid where they didn't explore every single possibility, and we're never going to get another raid like this. Now, I feel like these 3 things are very significant, but they don't amount to a total rework of game systems or anything. So it is completely realistic for any of these to be implemented next season. They did do racial rebalancing midway through the first season. Trinket design is completely isolated towards a season, and they could always just numerically buff things enough for them to be good. And number of bosses, obviously they won't be adding or removing bosses on a whim, but I can only hope that the end raid of the expansion has more bosses than the other 2. I am excited to see the season announcement that will most likely be later this week.